Today we are going to begin lesson 1 of chapter 4. As you can see, this lesson is going to be working with terminating and repeating decimals. Just to take note, one thing that you guys do have is your vocab words for this lesson. You can take a look here. You are going to be filling in your vocab web. First word you are going to see is what we would call repeating decimal. Obviously with a repeating decimal, you are going to have a digit or 2 or 3 digits that will actually repeat. Bar notation is your second vocab word. That is what we use to help us write out a digit or digits that repeat in a repeating decimal. And then last but not least is a terminating decimal. Okay, we're going to talk more about terminating decimal here in a second. Just to kind of go back and review here a little bit, the decimal form of a fraction is called a repeating decimal. We can use bar notation to describe repeated decimals. Please remember that bar notation is only going to be used or drawn over the digit or digits that repeat. For example, over here you can see we have 0.33333 repeated. The 3 is going to be continued to be the repeated digit, and so an easier way to write it, instead of writing it as 0.3333 ... we can use the bar notation and just put 0.3 with only 1 3, and your bar notation is over the 3. Same thing here on this one, you've got 0.1212 ... Easier way would just to be to draw the 0.12 bar notation over both. You can see here, same thing, you're looking at 11.38585. Only the 8 and the 5 are repeated. And so because only the 8 and the 5 are repeating, we're using the bar notation over the 8 and the 5. Terminating decimal, and we had talked a little bit, or I mentioned before with your terminating decimal, if you think of the word terminating, terminating means to stop. If something has been terminated, such as your job, for example, that means that job has been stopped or it's no longer. And so when we talk about terminating decimals, those are decimals that are going to stop, or basically your repeated digit would be a 0. 2500ths, for example, would be a terminating decimal. Okay. Just to kind of practice bar notation here, you can see on the middle of 263, they're asking you to match your repeated decimal to your correct bar notation. So if I take a look at this one, I've got 0.1111 ... Ellipses indicating that digit is going to repeat. What digit's repeating a 1? So we're going to use bar notation and write it as 0.1 with bar over the 1. Looking at the second one, I've got 0.611111. Again, the 1 is repeated, not the 6. And so when we use bar notation, we are just going to draw the bar over the 1, not the 6. And then looking at the bottom one, you've got 0.616161. Again, in this case, both digits, the 6 and the 1 are repeating. So when we use bar notation, we're putting it over both the 6 and the 1. Moving on to page 264, one of the skills that you guys are going to be looking at today is identifying whether it's a terminating or a repeating decimal, and then also taking those and writing them out as fractions and decimals. Okay. They give you a chart on the top of 264, for example, 7/10. Read the words correctly, or read the fraction correctly when you are trying to write it as a decimal. Okay, most of the time that will help you when you are writing it out. So 7/10, that would be the same as 7 over 10 as a fraction, or 7/10. I've got 0.7 or 7/10. Remember, the first place after your decimal is the tenths place. Looking at the second one, 1900ths. So if I'm thinking 1900ths, I'm thinking 19 over 100. Okay, or writing it out as a decimal, 1900ths. Here's your tenths, here's your hundredths, so I have 1900ths. Third one, you've got 105 thousandths. Remember, thousandths is the third place after the decimal, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So as a decimal, you're going to be writing that over here, 105 thousandths. As a fraction would be 105 over 1000. Okay. Again, if your denominator is a factor of 10, 100, or 1000, writing them as fractions and decimals become pretty easy. Okay. Next thing we're going to look at are a couple examples. Fraction of 74 over 100. If you're writing that as a decimal, just read it and write it out. So 74 hundredths, 74 hundredths, and I have the decimal. Examples 2 and 3. This one we have a denominator of 20. We could think of that in terms of a denominator being 100. So 20 times 5 gives me 100. 7 times 5 is 35. So another way to write that would be 35 hundredths, or decimal point 35. 5 3/4, you have a whole number piece there, so please do not forget that. And then 3/4 you could think of as 3/4. 3/4 is the value of 75 cents. Or I could think to myself 4 times 25 would be 100, and then 3 times 25 would be 75. So I'd have 5.75, and you can see that there. So one of the skills you guys are going to be working on is to take your fractions and write them as decimals. If we take a look at got it problem letter A, I have 3/10. The denominator is a 10, which makes it a lot easier, so just read it. 3/10, how do you write 3/10? Decimal point 3. 3/25, here I'm thinking common denominator of 100. 25 times 4 is 100. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 hundredths. Negative 6 1/2, I have a whole number there, so -6. I know 1/2, that should be a fraction that most of us know. It would be the same as 0.5, or I can think again to myself, 1/2 would be the same as how many tenths? 2 times 5 is 10, so 1 times 5 is 5. So you have -6 5/10 for your answer there. Okay. Taking a look and moving on at 265 at the top gives us another example. This one is 3/8 that they are looking at. When I think about it, 8 would not be a factor of 10, 100, or 1,000. So I'm not able to take 8 times a number to get 10, 100, or 1,000. So in these cases, if we do not know what they are, we're going to actually have to divide them out. Top number goes on the inside, numerator becomes your number on the inside, denominator goes on the outside. So you're thinking 3 divided by 8 or 3 divided by 8 here, and you're actually going to divide those out. 8 will not go into 3, so they've placed their zero. Decimal straight up. 8 goes into 33 times, and I have 24. Subtract, I have 6, bring the 0 down. 8 goes into 67 times. 7 times 8 is 56. I subtract and I get a 4. Bring my 0 down. 8 times 5 is 40, and it works out. This will be a fraction that you guys will be responsible to know, and so you will be working on that one as well to memorize what that's going to be as a fraction. -1/40, again, I can't take 40 times something to get 100, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to divide this out. So 1 divided by 40, place your decimal point. 40 does not go into 1, so I've put a 0. 40 won't go into 10, so I'm putting a 0 up there. 40 will go into 100 twice. 40 times 2 is 80. I subtract, I have 20 left, bring down my 0. 40 will go into 200 5 times, and it works out. So -1/40 as a fraction is going to be the same as -25 thousandths as a decimal. Same thing for 7/9. One of the things with 7/9 that you're going to want to remember is anytime you have 9 as a denominator, whatever your numerator is, that's the decimal repeated. Okay, so here we have 7/9. Obviously, it's going to be 0.7 repeated. A couple other examples you might see if I have 8/9, that's going to be the same as 0.8 repeated. 4/9 would be the same as 0.4 repeated. Those will be ones that you guys will have to memorize too, so hopefully we will not have to continue to divide those out. Taking a look down here on 265, you would pause the video for a moment and work on got it problems D, E, F, and G. To make sure that you are correct on those, that would be great. -7/8 cannot be multiplied to get 10, 100, or 1,000, so you're probably going to have to divide that out. Divide, divide, and divide. So go ahead and do that right now. Taking a look at your answers that you should have gotten for your got it problems, letter D, when I'm taking -7 divided by 8, so when I take -7 divided by 8, okay, and I divide it out, we should have come up with -875 thousandths. Letter E, we should be thinking 1 divided by 8. Okay, when we divide that out, again, you've got the whole number portion, so 2 and 125 thousandths. You could change this to an improper, which would be 8 times 2 is 16 plus 1 is 17 over 8, and divide it that way if you choose. -3/11, when we take -3 divided by 11, we should come up with -0.27 using the bar notation over both the 2 and the 7. And then 8 and 1/3. 1/3 is the same as 3/9, which would mean that that's going to be 8.3 repeated with the bar over the 3. briefly here, we're gonna go ahead and take a look at the top of 266. The example up here, writing your decimal as a fraction. So when I have 15 hundredths, okay, we can simplify that down. What goes into both 15 and 100? 5 would. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So simplified, we have 3/20ths. And you can take a look at that example a little bit more in detail, okay? The fraction of the aquarium made up by each fish, write it in simplest form. Molly would be the same as 2/10. Okay, well 2/10 is going to reduce down to 1/5. The guppy, as we take a look at the guppy above it, was 25 hundredths. So when we write that out, that's going to be the same as 25 over 100, which would also reduce down to 1/4. And then looking at the angelfish, you can see it's 4/10. So I'm going to write 4/10, which is going to be the same as 2/5. Now, if you would take a moment and go ahead and work on your extra practice page in your book, you'll see it on the website as well, but that's going to be page 269.